Hello everyone, and welcome to this fifth video in our series on Leela's opening repertoire. I'm Grandmaster Matthew Sadler, and we're going to be taking a look at some interesting stuff like the Alekhine and the Scandinavian. Start with the Alekhine, knight f6. What does Leela want? Well, Leela isn't afraid and wants the same aggressive line that Stockfish and Komodo Dragon want, and indeed I can thoroughly recommend this line. It's also recommended by Gawain Jones in his Coffee House opening repertoire, and yeah, black's really got a lot of problems. Takes, bishop f5, knight f3, e6, knight c3, bishop e7, bishop e2, knight c6, castles, bishop e3, f6, takes, queen d2. We've seen this many times at the TCEC. Been in some super finals, and actually Gawain quotes a lot of TCEC games in his book, so that also makes you very happy as well when you see that. H6, rook d1, queen e8, bishop f4, rook d8, queen e3 is Leela's line, and after bishop g4, knight e4 takes, knight f6, and rook takes f3 is Leela's idea. And well, Leela gives white a 0.40 advantage, which is quite a bit for Leela there. After queen d7, funnily enough, king f2 is Leela's move. Don't thoroughly understand that one, but the idea is that after rook ff8, b3, knight d4, well, we're going bishop c7 and rook takes d4 here, and we're just trying to make sure that well, if things get swapped off in the ending, then white's king will be well placed. Leela likes this ending an awful lot, and well, if all the major pieces get swapped off, then bishop against the knight is pretty nice. So that's the Alekhine. I said I'd just recommend have a look at Komodo's and Stockfish's recommendation on that as well, and I think you've got a pretty good repertoire against the Alekhine. Now another idea that of course to look at is the Scandinavian. So after takes, queen takes, knight c3, Leela's first choice is not Tivyakov's queen d6, but queen a5. And here Leela just basically goes for the same line that a lot of engines want. And we've also had quite a few games like this at the TCEC, either in super finals or in bonuses. Knight e5, e6, g4, h4. So basically, you know, white just chases the bishop, gains a lot of space on the king side, then gets the bishop pair. And, you know, this is advantage something like, yeah, I think 0.7, 0.8 for Stockfish. And for Leela, it's about 0.37. So, you know, not a winning advantage, of course, but a pretty clear one. And after bishop d6, queen f3 is a Ferrugia Carlsen game. a4, of course, is Leela's main idea. g6, h6. And then, well, there's a game Bronstein against Husman. Bronstein, Israel 2021, where black went a6 here. Castles is Leela's move. Queen f3, a6, bishop f4. Queen c7 takes, and then rook a3, amazingly enough, rook b3. I mean, I think it's pretty clear that you know, white's got a nice position, plenty of possibilities to gain space, but black is pretty solid as well, you know. And I think you know, basically the games between engines have been either ending in wins for white or draws in about equal measure, maybe a few more draws than wins. But this is a pretty simple main line, really. I couldn't imagine that this would be particularly pleasant to play with black every single time. Against Tivyakov's queen d6, Leela likes interesting aggressive line, actually. Knight f3, c6, d4, knight f6, knight e5, and after knight d7, yeah, I mean, knight c4 has been quite popular. Recent game Geary against Artemiev as well, that carried on like this, bishop f4, bishop e5. But Leela just wants to play f4, which is pretty aggressive. g6, bishop c4, e6, bishop e3, knight b6, and then just letting the bishop be taken actually, and just go queen e2, which is very interesting in actual fact. Find it very hard to make moves like that, I'm afraid, you know, giving up the bishop pair, because I love my bishop pair. But yeah, Leela obviously quite flexible, and takes, bishop f2 is quite nice, looking for queen e5, and then just you're just going to try and get a pawn on e5 and get an outpost on d6, maybe even d takes e5 then, and then knight e4. So bishop g7, queen e5, queen d7, bishop h4, knight h5. Amazing how black's pieces are being stretched here. G3 takes, knight f7, rook e8, castles. knight f6, rook e1. I mean, this bishop on h4 feels a little bit funny, but it is cutting across the black king. And, well, you know, if white manages to get this knight active, maybe bring it to d3, for example, to get into e5 or c5, maybe get c4, d5 working, this could be quite unpleasant. Definitely an interesting idea to look at f4, because I don't think it's particularly one of the main lines. So, okay, that's Scandinavian. Let's keep on going with some unusual stuff. How about 1d6? Well, I mentioned it a number of times that it was quite surprising that after d4, knight f6, knight c3, all of the engines, and Leela is not any different, wants to play e5 and transpose back into the Philidor, and doesn't want to play the Pirc, which is, yeah, as I said, I find quite surprising. I think it just shows how much Leela values 1 e5 openings. There's nothing particularly amazing from Leela here, really just playing the main line that everyone else wants, really. h6, h3, rook e8, a5, queen c7, bishop e3, and white's got the standard small advantage there. Leela just, yeah, sort of tootles along with a slight advantage there, a 0.27 advantage in the end. Perfectly fine. If black does go g6, then Leela likes the bishop e3 line. Bishop d7, queen d2, c6. And then just like Stockfish, actually, when black plays c6, Leela plays a4, which is not something I particularly expected, I have to say. And after castles f3, queen a5, knight e2, Leela's, even in a lot of lines, just like Stockfish, is looking to castle queenside. It actually thought the best line was e5 here, and then bishop h6, b5, which is a novelty. There was a Lithuanian game, Setkauskas against Jankunas Plunge 2012, that had bishop e6, which looks a little bit funny. That bishop's going to be a target somehow, I think. But b5, h4, b4, knight d1 takes, e takes d4, h5, rook e8, knight f2, b3, c3, takes, bishop e6, castles queenside, never worry about the a4 pawn. It's pretty clear that white's having quite a bit of fun here. You know, quite sharp, but well, as long as you've got a few good lines analysed, then should be possible to play this way. But very interesting, this idea of just meeting c6 with a4. I mean, if you go a6, then they don't bother, they let the pawn go to b5, but obviously c6, yeah, both Stockfish and Leela consider that it's worth stopping b7 to b5, and then just carrying on with an attack against the king side with f3, bishop h6, h4. So yeah, pretty interesting stuff. 1g6 is actually the same thing. I mean, Leela just wants to play exactly the same thing. Knight f6, f3. Plays this very flexible move order that I actually thought was quite nice for white. And after castles, well, the reason for it is that it gives white the opportunity to switch back to a King's Indian, if ever, a same-ish King's Indian, if ever you want to. And I think that I saw Nigel Short using this move repertoire against I think a Scottish grandmaster. Yeah, I talked with Nigel afterwards, and he was very happy with his move order. And the funny thing was that I prepared exactly the same thing if ever I was to play his opponent. The amazing thing about here, though, is that yeah, Leela actually recommends this pawn sacrifice, c5. Takes, queen d8, rook d8, bishop c5. Now, we know this in the King's Indian, the same-ish bishop e3, but there normally the c-pawn is on c4, which you can imagine it gives some weaknesses on d4, blocks in this light-squared bishop, but this really looks like it shouldn't be anything at all. But as always, the engines are very keen on lines that just free, you know, their pieces, and they're pretty sure that they can play actively and accurately enough to keep it all going. And well, this doesn't look too bad at all. Bishop b6, b3. Black gets the bishop pair, and some counterplay here. And this is following a correspondence game. King takes d1 was Leela's novelty, but after b5, Leela thought that it's going to be a 0.3 advantage for white, but perfectly decent for black. So well, if you come across this position, maybe worth looking at, because to be honest, in this sort of position, the other alternatives like e5 or whatever are not that tempting. White gets very easy play against the king side. So c5, remember that one. Interesting as well is one knight c6. Now the key point is about this, I mean, most white players, when faced with one knight c6, they play knight f3, but of course this allows black to play e5 and eventually transpose into the Berlin. So actually it's probably worth looking for an alternative. And yeah, I mean, Simon Williams and Richard Palliser in their Grandmaster Gambits book, they recommend or they suggest b4, which is a hell of a gambit, I have to say, but d4 is probably the most natural. But yeah, this line has been seen a lot in the TCEC, and actually black's done pretty well with it. It's proved a pretty tough nut to crack. Now, funnily enough, Magnus Carlsen played this with black against Levon Aronian, but got really quite horribly crunched, so maybe it's a bit more difficult to play than you think. But just have a look at what Leela's line is. I think it's quite amazing. b4, so that's quite decent for white. I mean, just but you're sort of anticipating black playing f6, you know, you're getting ready to play b5. But Leela takes and plays this move b5, which is yeah, I had to look at that one twice and just yeah, just to really believe it. But the idea is that if queen takes b5, we go a5, and well, you've no longer got b5 because your queen's blocked, and yeah, moves like a takes b4 going to undermine d4, and you're just going to go for some sort of you know, Benko style counterplay against the queen side. Yeah, it was looking pretty good for black. Leela ends up with a line that's 0.16 there, basically, and actually even says that white shouldn't take on b5, but should play a4 here. Takes, a5, b5, knight b8, and then h4. Yeah, I mean, I think if you saw this 6 or 7 years ago, you'd say the white player was crazy, and now it just looks like standard, you know, super creative engine chess. Really amazing how far we've gone there. But I think one's knight c6 is definitely a nice little idea, you know, and of course, you know, what's the value of one knight c6, knight f3, e5 of this move order? Well, you're avoiding a lot of the annoying lines like the bishop's game with bishop c4, or the Vienna, or the king's gambit. Well, saves a little bit of theory to learn, you know. So that's actually yeah, quite an interesting line there. So there we are. That was the Alekhines, that was the Scandinavian, all sorts of different types, the modern, the Pirc, and the Nimzowitsch one knight c6. That's basically all we're going to have a look at for 1e4. The next video is going to be about 1d4. See you there.